Welcome to Meet Miss Jess, where we discuss education, relationships, and trends in sustainable fashion. Each week, we'll share stories and insights to cultivate a more empathetic and inclusive world. Welcome to Meet Miss Jess.
Ooh. Well, Loretta, thank you for being on Meet Miss Jess VR. This is episode number 3, so I'm still a little bit like in the beginning stages. I still have a little bit of jitters still, but it's very exciting, and especially to have someone, like you work with the brain, which is a huge fascination of mine. I'm really grateful to have you here, and a special shout out to the World's Mayor Experience and Joshua T. Berglund for producing this. I would not be able to do any of this without them. So thank you to them, and thank you for being here, Loretta. So you are all about the brain, and that beautiful painting next to you, you just told us that you painted that, and you shared your creative way of making it into a 3D form. Would you mind sharing that? Because I think it's so cool.
Oh, sure. I got spray insulation, and I sprayed it on the canvas where the brains are, and then I painted it pink. And the motivation for this was that, so I was a college professor for 20 years, and I had this frustrating feeling that my students were not studying, and my own children were not studying. And I was in this environment where everyone said, oh, study doesn't matter. That's old-fashioned. And I was sort of frustrated about that. And I was in a different field. I was not focused on the brain then. And I was just looking for a way to express that idea that, it takes some effort to learn.
So what were you in before the brain? What were you teaching?
I was a professor of international management in an MBA program.
So you were doing international business management, and then you wound up in the brain area of things. How did that happen?
Sure. So what I teach now is the brain chemicals that make us feel good. I don't teach in a university. I just teach in online resources. And the happy chemicals that we've inherited from animals that make us feel good, that our brain controls in a nonverbal way. So how I got to this, one way of understanding, try to make sense of it myself. I was educated in this idea that something has gone wrong to make us unhappy, and there's this other place where everybody is happy, and if we could just get to that other place, then we would all feel good all the time. And to blame our own little niche of the world, however you define it, as the cause of all of your unhappiness. But because I had lived and worked in a lot of countries and cultures, I realized that they all have the same drama going on, often a lot worse than the things we complain about. And so that's when I started realizing that the problems humans have are so similar. And I started reading history and saw that humans have always had the same patterns. And so that's how I got interested in how our brain creates them.
I think that's fascinating. I was actually just looking into how we could, tap into our own ways of improving our happiness. And it listed off 4 things: dopamine, serotonin, 2 more. What are the other 2?
Oxytocin and endorphin.
Yes. And a lot of it has to do with, intrinsic and extrinsic, but so it's self-love, self-care, human connection, and physical exertion were kind of key players that stood out to me.
Yes. Well, okay. So I wrote this book 15 years ago. I was the one that chose these 4 chemicals and started calling them the happy chemicals. And since then, other people have copied this, but they have put a spin on these chemicals in a way that makes it socially acceptable. But my work began from research on animal brains, because animals have these chemicals and they can't lie to themselves and say, well, I wasn't thinking that. I really don't care about myself. I only care about humanity. And humans don't want to acknowledge their self-interest. But in the animal world, it's easy to see that you have to act on your self-interest to survive. And it's easy to see in other people that they are acting on their self-interest all the time. And that helps us understand what turns on our happy chemicals is when you act on your self-interest. So you can't really make sense of your emotions unless you're honest about your self-interested motives.
Yeah, it all starts within, right?
Yeah. But what I'm saying is it's not, it's within. And people who say, I don't care about myself, that giving to other people just makes them happy, it's because they want acceptance in a certain social group and they think this is the way to get it. And all mammals struggle with which social group they belong in because they want protection from predators. So that's why we have such strong feelings about that. And like exercise is another example. We're getting a lot of pressure that exercise is the source of happiness. But in fact, I live in a place, and you probably do too, like, people who exercise all the time and they're still not happy. So this is a very simplistic interpretation. It's sort of assuming that you spend your whole life on the couch drinking beer, that this is going to be the solution. So in fact, the bottom line, the way I try to explain it is, let's say you smoke cigarettes and you want to stop smoking cigarettes. And somebody tells you, oh, every time you feel like having a cigarette, you should do push-ups. And that may sound like a nice theory, but you're not going to do it because it doesn't feel good. So what if you say, instead of that, every time I feel like having a cigarette, I'm going to listen to comedy. So you're a little more motivated to do that because it feels good. So we have to acknowledge that our brain is motivated to do things that feel good. And then we have to adapt and transform our environment to work with this brain to get it to do stuff that's good for us.
Well, you just hit so many topics. So so education, I believe learning should be fun. I think that just working with students and in education, that when you can figure a child out what their interests are, what motivates them, and you meet them there and make it an experience that they enjoy and they want to partake in, you get a lot more out of it. So that's amazing.
Well, here's the problem with that. So every mammal has an urge for power. In the animal world, they're always competing, and the more dominant individuals end up having more offspring. So genes for social dominance are what we've inherited. So children get a big charge out of dominating you, and nobody can admit this. But if you have a child who refuses to do their work, that's fun for them. So if they say, well, I'm not going to do my work, and then you say, oh, well, what about this? What about this? Oh, I'll make it fun. I'll do this. I'll do that. And they say, no, that's not fun. So then you keep tap dancing to try to entertain them. And they get more by refusing to work than by working. So that's the problem. And historically, when people trained horses, they talked about a carrot and a stick. So now it's taboo to use a stick, obviously. So we only want to give kids carrots. And if they still refuse to move, then you want to give them more carrots and more carrots and more carrots. And they have so many carrots that the carrot doesn't motivate them either. So that's sort of the problem.
Right. Well, definitely you need motivation, but you also they need to be the one that that is motivating themselves as well. Right. So I worked in early childcare or early childhood development, childcare, and it was always about you don't feed energy into the behaviors that you don't want. So you do a lot of waiting for them to realize, hey, that doesn't work. It doesn't get me the results I want. And then once they figure that out, then you kind of sometimes have to be intuitive in knowing when to, okay, now's my time, slide it in. Here's your next choice. And then they typically tend to take that choice. But the relationship that you establish with them, the trust that you build with them definitely plays an impact on how quickly you can move along.
Yes, exactly. But, you know, it's hard because if you have a number of children and they all see that the one who behaves badly gets more attention,
right?
You know, it's really hard.
Right. And so earlier you also touched on something really interesting. It was about us not wanting to acknowledge ourselves in the group. Like because I know that in the past I have it also in the group wanting to be protected. I think I've never heard anyone explain or bring that part up, but it's very true. It's like we're all a pack and there's a leader of the pack and everybody else has to kind of follow suit behind them to be protected. I would love to hear more of your thoughts on how that fits in like education.
Good. Yeah, that tough question. So bottom line, anytime you want to be following the group and getting the protection of the group, you're paying a price for that. And I learned this from animals because we're told like, oh, animals want to be in the group and they support each other, but it's really not true. When animals stick with the group, it's harder for them to get food. They have conflict over food, or frankly, they eat food that has been soiled by the excrement of another animal and they get sick. So animals are really motivated to spread out. And what keeps them together is a common enemy. When they sense an enemy, a predator, then they run back to the group. And humans, if you look at any group you're in, they constantly remind you of a common enemy in order to keep you in the group and loyal and motivated to support the group, unfortunately. So that's the natural mammalian thing, is I'm always weighing the benefit of the group versus the benefit of hiking off to greener pasture on my own. Now, how does it work in education? Well, one thing that's going on is like they're saying, well, everyone should feel like they belong, but if you don't feel like you belong, they're making it like it's the group's fault and not acknowledging that you're creating this feeling yourself of whether or not you belong. And maybe some people would rather go their own way. Like, for example, I would much rather study myself than study in a study group, and, you know, have some respect for people who have their own opinions on that. And one, oh yeah, here's an important thing. When you are making these decisions, you are using neural pathways built by your past experience. So whatever got you group support when you were young, it paves a neural pathway to say, that's the way to do it today. So we're all trying to get these chemicals in the ways that worked for us when we were young. And that makes it complicated.
Well, early childhood is when we start to develop all of those. So I would say our parents are the most important people in our lives, and to equip our parents with the wisdom and knowledge and tools and skill sets to guide us in the most appropriate way would be crucial to live happy, healthy lives in the future.
Sure, exactly. But kids also have something called mirror neurons, where they're mirroring their parents in a way that, like, let's say mom or dad feels like they don't belong, then the kid learns that feeling from them, even though the parent is maybe very loving and attached. So that's one issue. The other issue is that in the animal world, your parents are going to die when you're young, and you have to attach to a group in order to survive. And so when we are adolescents, that's when our brain says, whoa, I can't rely on my parents forever to take care of me. So I have to learn the skills of attaching to my peers. And so that's like a new level of neural pathways that we build in adolescence. And we get our oxytocin, dopamine, serotonin in adolescence in new ways. And then we're motivated to repeat those adolescent strategies throughout life.
Wow. So then our peers and our teachers, how they interact with us is crucial too. So do you feel like there's a way to break out of the pack mentality? Or is that where we are destined to always be, is to belong to a group? Because so I've gone through life where I have been at times feeling like I need the group for protection, but I've also, in the same sense, never really been one to like to join groups. Like I've done cheerleading and volleyball and all the things, but I did them all once. Like I didn't stick.
Yep.
And
I know
anytime
exactly what you mean. Yeah.
And I didn't stick there either. So I feel like there's some sort of disconnect in those theories, for me at least.
Exactly. So here's the thing. Like I said, if you just remember that protection always has a price, following the herd comes at a price. So our brain evolved to make good decisions about when is it worth it to pay the price of following the crowd, and when is it worth it to take the risk of going your own way. So both paths have costs and benefits. And so our brain is designed to collect the information, weigh the information, and say, okay, this morning I'm going to go my own way, but this afternoon I'm going to follow the crowd. And then tomorrow I'm going to follow the crowd in the morning and go my own way in the afternoon. So rather than thinking of it as all or nothing, is that we're always deciding, like if you're a goat, like the goat is taking its next step. Should its next step go toward the open pasture, or should its next step go toward the group? And that's what we're doing.
So critically thinking and balancing throughout life is crucial. So if we took this to the workplace, there's all sorts of the groups and the clickiness and wolves and sheep and all sorts of things in the workplace. What are your thoughts on how to best navigate that balance in the workplace?
So just like at home, it's very frustrating. And I was, of course, as frustrated about this drama as anyone else. And then over time, and with the help of some therapy, I learned to understand that I was creating the drama inside me. And despite the fact that everyone in the workplace and in your home is a mammal that's vying for their own self-interest, that I'm having a reaction to it because I want them to focus on my interest. So we need to understand that we're fanning the flames because of our own urge for our own ends. So here's a simple example. When a person says, I didn't get invited to that party and I'm upset about it, but I didn't really want to go to the party. I just wanted to be invited. So it's sort of like, even at work, it's like maybe when someone else gets promoted, you feel bad, but you don't really want to do what they're doing, but you just feel bad that they got it. So this is how the mammal brain works. And we have to understand that this is the monkey inside you that's always wanting to get more bananas and is going to get upset when it misses out on a banana. But when I get upset, I could say, okay, it's not a real emergency. It's just a little drip of stress chemicals, and my body's going to excrete the chemicals in a few minutes, and I don't have to make a big deal out of it.
Oh, is that how it works? That's a great way to explain it. So we're manifesting our own reality, right? What about sabotage? How does, because you kind of you tapped on that a little bit, and in the workplace, you get sabotage where you self-sabotage, where you do what you were just talking about, if you act without letting all of those things release. But I know in my history of working, there's been a lot of sabotage, especially with women. Women, in my experience, don't really always love to see other women succeed in the workplace. I think that a lot of it stems from them thinking that they will not succeed if someone else is, and that might be because that's how it is sometimes. But what do you think about sabotage? How do we handle it, see it, prevent it?
Sure. So these are two different subjects, self-sabotage versus by others. So let's start with self-sabotage. I don't really agree with the self-sabotage theory because I think that our core inner mammal is constantly striving for survival. It's just that it defines survival in adolescence. So you know how like adolescents will take crazy risks because that helps them rise in the hierarchy of adolescent groups. So that's the animal survival instinct from the perspective of an adolescent. So when you do things that may seem self-sabotaging, it's because you're using a neural pathway of something that worked when you were young. And old neural pathways have a lot of power because they're the highways of your brain. And we always would rather flow into a highway rather than a tiny little path. The electricity in your brain flows so easily into those old highways that you don't even know you made a choice. So that's the subject of all of my books. But let's talk about sabotage from other people. So people are competitive, and that's why it helps to know how competitive animals are. I was shocked by this. So all animals, like animals care who they mate with. They want to mate with the best one rather than just mating all over the place the way you might think. They're really picky and they fight for the best partner. So how do they know who the best partner is? Every species has a very specific characteristic, and everybody wants the one with that characteristic. I'm grossly oversimplifying it, but I have a lot of information about this on my website and my reading list. But the bottom line is that social comparison is a natural impulse that all mammals have because they want to be in a group, but they don't want to be at the bottom of the group. So they want to rise in the group once they have a group. And they make comparisons all the time. And we are making comparisons. But because we do it with our nonverbal brain, we don't really accept the fact that we're making them ourselves. So we blame other people for making the comparisons and judging us. So, yeah, maybe they are trying to, get ahead of you, but you're wanting to get ahead of them and you're not acknowledging that.
Wow. That was mind-blowing. That was great. Okay, so what tell us what you're up to now and what you have coming up in the future.
Sure. So I just wrote a novel for the first time because I wanted to make this information entertaining, especially for young people. So I wrote a novel about people who run a goat farm and observe goat behavior and try to teach that to other people and sort of the sabotage that happens to them when they do that. So the name of the book is The Jane Goodall of Goats.
All right. That sounds great.
And then my next book is going to be for teens and parents of teens.
What's the main focus?
So the idea is to understand that our neural pathways are built are finalized. The highways in our brains are finalized in our teen years. And our motivations come from these happy chemicals that we've inherited from earlier animals. And animals are very motivated by what's called reproductive success. And its simple answer is like in past generations, people wanted to have as many children as they could, and that was their main element of pride. And today, many people don't want to have children, but we're still doing that with the brains inherited from animals who put all of their energy into spreading their genes as much as they could. And animals don't know what genes are, but their happy chemicals depend on everything that spreads their genes. And that includes appearance, popularity, and strength. And this is what adolescents are obsessing over: appearance, popularity, and strength. And to understand our obsession with these things and how that builds our neural pathways so that we can design healthier ways of channeling these impulses.
Wow, that's great. So I developed Miss Jess VR experiences, which are to teach in action, to guide students in virtual reality to learn things that aren't as easy to learn unless you've experienced them. So, what is an experience you would choose if you could just make one experience? What would the focus be? What would they walk through and gain from it?
Sure. Oh, that's a great idea. Okay. So, off the top of my head, the most important skill in life is knowing how to shift from a bad feeling to a good feeling. And anyone can do this, but you have to learn it just like you might learn to play the violin or learn a foreign language. So imagine you're having a bad feeling because, let's say, you didn't get invited to that party. So you feel like smoking a cigarette, but you don't want to smoke the cigarette. So what are you going to do in that moment? So let's imagine that the bad feeling is a highway in your brain that you've chosen to drive down that highway that triggers more and more bad feeling chemicals. So what do you need right now is an exit from the highway. So that's the first thing, is to say, I'm not really having any bad emergency. I'm just on a bad highway and I need to build an exit ramp from this highway. So the first step is to just know that you're not having a crisis, but you're just on a highway that's triggering bad feeling chemicals, and you can exit from that highway. And then the second step is to build a new highway that goes toward your happy chemicals. And what triggers happy chemicals? All it takes is one step toward a goal. In the interest of time, I was just saying it very succinctly, one step toward a goal. So how do you get yourself to do this? Because you're not in the mood to step toward a goal while you're feeling bad. So in the beginning, you have to give yourself a reward for doing this. So let's say I'm going to listen to comedy for 5 minutes after I take that one step toward my goal. And I'm going to do that every day for 45 days. And that's going to build the new highway in my brain.
That's brilliant. I can see it already. It's like a video game. And the reward thing I was just reading about, well, actually, I asked AI about it and AI told me all about it. But that's absolutely brilliant. Thank you for that idea.
Well, build it and let me know about it.
I'm going to. Well, when we get to that point, I would love to include you. I think it would be awesome to have your expertise. So here's my other question. If you were a superhero, what would your name be? What would your superpower be? And what would your outfit be?
Huh. Huh. Well, my superpower would be the ability to relax my muscles, because I've learned that we all hold like more tension than we need to, and it's hard to unlock those muscles that are like tense all the time. So that's a skill that like other superheroes may not have, like they're always, on. So I'm thinking, I guess the name for that would be chill. And let's just say my outfit would be not very tight fitting.
A flowy blue, like evening gown cape. I can see it. That's wonderful, and it's so true that we get tense, and it's hard to realize that we're doing it. But our physical health affects everything. So brilliant. Maybe your superpower could also be to help other people loosen up.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining me, Loretta. And thank you to the World's Mayor Experience. Thank you to the Marine Foundation. Check them out if you have not yet on how to become a global citizen. And is there any last words you have for the audience, where they can find you? Anything else you want to say?
Sure. My website is innermammalinstitute.org. Innermammalinstitute.org. I have lots of free resources. All of my books are listed, and a free 5-day happy chemical jumpstart. If you opt in the form at the bottom of the page, any page, and give me your email, you'll get 1 email a day for 5 days on dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, endorphin, and cortisol.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And I look forward to reading about what you're doing and learning more myself. And thank you again for being on Miss Jess VR. Meet Miss
Great.
Jess.
Keep in touch.
Thank you.